'Tis the season to be whining. Lots of fan bases have lots of things to say. The coach and I are back. Let's get after it. This is Football Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to another INC Live Football Friday. It is December 15th. It has been 2 weeks since the coach and I have been in front of your faces. And right now there are 0 people watching this, but that is okay because there is one other person on the other side, and that is the coach, Brad Powell. Good to see that face, pal.
Yeah, Iceman. Happy to be here, buddy. It's been a long 2 weeks just in general, despite having to miss out on doing the show. Just been a lot going on. I mean, it's the season for that sort of thing, I guess, just to build up to the holidays. When you close in on the end of the calendar year at work, there's different things, I's that need to be dotted, T's that need to be crossed. And just with the business that I'm in, this is kind of a busy time of year. I kind of work in e-commerce a little bit. So gifting is a big thing for what we do. So that's kind of ramped up and things like that. But no, man, it's happy to be here. Enjoying the Christmas season. My kids are like prime age right now, where they're fully immersed in all the things. And I know that young James is right in that same range. So I'm sure you guys are having a lot of fun.
Yes, young James is definitely in that range, and he is jonesing to come up here. As far as everybody's concerned, it is 9:40 p.m. on the East Coast here, so well past our recruit's bedtime. So he's going to be up here earlier rather than later. But yes, very much into the season. Today was his Christmas concert at his school, and it went well. It went better than I thought that it would, given the fact that it's a bunch of 3-year-olds. You know how this works. So at 2 years old, they just kind of cried and stared at their parents. This year, they actually participated. So I thought that was good. A very coordinated look. You saw the photos. He had suspenders and a bow tie. He was ready to go, and he participated. So it was a nice little day for him. Short day, and he's been home with me, following me around like a little barnacle all day long. But he's ready to go. I'm ready to go. We got, 10 days? Essentially 9 days until the big man shows up. So I'm very, very excited and very, very stoked for sure.
Yeah, we had our Christmas concert last week, one day on Wednesday, Thursday, something like that. And it went fairly well. My daughter's school does a pretty good job. So her school is like pre-K through 4th grade. And it's a small school. I live in a small town. And they split it on 2 different nights. So they do like pre-K through 1st grade on one night, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th on the other. And so that's nice. The whole thing takes in total like from an hour, I think, tops, which is great. They get up there, like each class sings like 3 songs. They're great at ushering them off and on the stage or whatever you want to call it. And then on to the next. And it's not too bad. And this was the first time we took Carver, and he did pretty well because there's only so much space he has to operate in. We I don't know, good or bad, probably a bad thing. As parents, we have not, for the sake of our sanity, we haven't put him in those situations very often. And so this is something we're trying to do more so he can acclimate to behaving himself. And look at that. I love the superhero mask.
I don't know what happened to it, but it is gone now. So we're going to get him all set up here. But I like where your head is at. I like where your head is at with your son, because getting them to behave in any type of public realm is never an easy thing. But speaking of people who are in a public realm, do you want to show Coach Brad and everybody, all 0 people that are watching this right now, what you have in your hand? What is that you have in your hand?
The Alabama football.
It is
That
an
is
Alabama
awesome.
football, because his mother's coworker is a huge Crimson Tide fan, much like Jonah, who I wish was with us right now. And she gave James an Alabama football for Christmas. So he is ready to go for the college football playoff, which we will get to in a little bit. So, James, you are up here. Excuse me. Good Lord. James, you are up here. Wow. James, you are up here with my phlegm and your Alabama football ready to roll. Are you ready to pick a game for Coach Brad, who you haven't seen in a couple of weeks?
Hi,
You're
James.
not ready to pick a football game?
I am.
Okay, you kind of shook your head there, which is the exact opposite of what I thought. Okay, I'm going to go against what I usually do here, and I'm going to have you pick a game that I think you're going to be swayed on, but I'm going to do it in a way. We'll see how it works, all right? So are you ready, James?
Mm-mm.
Okay, Cowboys,
Cowboys.
Bills.
Bills.
Who's going to win?
Cowboys.
Okay, I figured that's what was going to happen. So we're going to do another one, and we're going to try to even this thing out. Are you ready?
Mhm.
Okay, Ravens,
Ravens.
Jaguars.
Jaguars.
Who's going to win?
Ravens.
Okay, so your two games are pretty solid picks.
Yeah.
We have the Cowboys over the Bills this coming Sunday and the Ravens over the Jaguars this coming Sunday. I think those are two pretty solid picks. As you see here, you are 10-4 with your Crimson Tide football. Are you ready for bowl season, James?
Uh-huh.
And are you going to watch the Crimson Tide play the Michigan Wolverines on January 1st, I think? Is it on New Year's Day or is it New Year's or the day after?
I'm not sure,
Could
honestly.
be the 31st, actually. That could be it. I think they don't do it on New Year's Day because they let the New Year's Six Bowls kind of have their own time
Sure.
to shine. All right, buddy. It's time for you to go to bed. It is late. Can you tell Brad to have a good night?
Have a good day.
Good night, James.
And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
All right,
You
buddy.
got that right.
Okay. Two solid picks there by
Those are great
Monsieur
picks.
James, I would say. All right, buddy. I love you. Okay.
Those are rock solid picks.
And I will see you in the morning.
Cowboys are playing good football, I feel like, right now. But really, I mean, we've seen the Cowboys play good football during the regular season before in recent history.
We have.
So, so it's as far as if they can put it together, hold it together through the postseason, that'll be the determining factor. But the NFC is tough. Their division is, well, the Eagles, I guess, the Commanders, and the oh goodness,
Giants.
the Giants. Yeah, not great, but
Yes, Tommy DeVito and the Giants. We'll get to that a little bit later because we actually have a lot of NFL talk this week. We're kind of pushing and moving toward NFL now because the college football playoff has been determined, and that's where we're going to start. We're a little bit late on that, I would say, because I think that the outrage took place a week after we actually did our last show because we just couldn't make it happen with me traveling up north to visit my folks and all that kind of stuff. So we're a little bit late to this, so I'm sure that everybody has gotten all their outrage out. I'm sure that nobody is upset about what has taken place, but to the gist of it is that the College Football Committee did a thing, and they had a tough choice to make, and they picked Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama as their top four for the College Football Playoff. Noticeably absent from this were Florida State, who finished 13-0, winning the ACC, an undefeated regular season, undefeated postseason, at least in terms of the conference championship, and they were left out of the playoff, and that has been the biggest talking point. I think it's still being talked about. If you go on X, you see a lot of Florida State fans chirping about it, and we have not had a chance to discuss it. We have certainly bantered about it offline, and I think we are in agreement on it, but I think our agreement, as in you and I, is a major disagreement from what most people are saying about this. So let's get into it because it's probably going to be divisive and get us hopefully a ton of followers because they're hating on us.
I'm sure that'll happen. And I do want to say, I apologize if I seem a little distracted over the next few minutes. The Braves are taking on Cleveland State tonight, and I got them on the ESPN app on my phone here in front of me, and they're up by 4 with just under 4 minutes to go. In Peoria, my dad is there, which is why he is not in the chat. But no, hopefully they can hold on. They need a win. But anyways, yes, the college football playoff. I think that the committee did the right thing, and the reason I think that is we said this leading up to it. It should be the 4 best teams, not the 4 most deserving teams. Now, I understand, like, Florida State has every right to be upset about it. I don't fault them for being mad. I don't fault it. Sucks. I mean, it does suck that someone had to be left out. And I would argue that there are 2 teams between Florida State and Georgia that were left out that could make a strong case for the fact they should be in there. And I think you could even make an argument that if the committee really was going to put the 4 best teams in, that Georgia should have been in there as well. And I think the reason that didn't happen was the moment you took Alabama, you couldn't leave Texas out at that point because they had a head-to-head. And even though it was week 1, it matters. And and Texas was playing pretty well down the stretch. They had a statement win in the Big 12 championship game. They took care of their business. They did what they needed to do. And really, the biggest thing that's eye-popping to me is just look at the strength of schedule difference between Florida State and Alabama and Texas. It's vast, and that's not Florida State's fault per se. You know, it, LSU wasn't terrible, but LSU didn't have as good of a season as they could have had, or some predicted them to have. The ACC in general just wasn't super strong. Clemson was down from what we're used to. Louisville had a good season, but they couldn't put it together when it mattered there at the end against Florida State to get the job done. And then Duke fell off when Riley Leonard got banged up. So it's just they didn't have really any impressive wins. Their most impressive win was them week 1 against LSU, and the way LSU played throughout the season kind of kept diminishing the quality of that win. So I have no issue with them being upset about it, but I think that the committee absolutely did the right thing. And I think that the haters, or the people that are really fired up about it, fall into one of 3 camps. Either they are a Florida State fan, which, again, if you are, totally understand you being pissed about it. Makes sense. Okay. They are an SEC hater, because I've seen a ton of that. Oh, they couldn't leave the SEC out. It's all about money, blah, blah, blah. And that one I think is stupid, but I get that there's a large number of people that just flat out hate the SEC. So
Sure.
whatever. And then the third one is just the camp of people who, the it's not fair crowd. That's kind of I don't like that argument in any scenario, really, because I've always said fair doesn't mean equal. And is it fair, or is it not right? Because I think that, not to rehash what I've already said, that they got the 4 best teams in there, and it sucks. And also the fact that the playoff committee literally has it built in to their process to take into consideration the roster and any prominent players that may be injured and not participating in the game. Like, it's literally in their process in black and white written out that that's something they can consider. And I think in this situation, it was imperative that that was in there, because that really was the biggest deciding factor in the situation. I think that if the quarterback's not injured, then even with their lousy strength of schedule, then I think they probably get in. It's hard to say, but I don't know. It's just I get some of the outrage from fans, Florida State fans specifically, but I think at the end of the day, again, committee did the right thing.
I think that the committee is in a really tough spot. And the thing is that the NCAA has put themselves in this position, in my opinion, because when you're trying to pare it down to 4 teams, not every single year is going to be very cut and dry. And this year in particular, there were a lot more than 4 teams that probably were worthy of a shot. Even a 2-loss Oregon team is still probably one of the top 8 teams in the country and deserves a shot. But when you go down to 4 teams, nobody's going to be happy in this scenario, right? Because if you leave out the SEC champion, that's a really bad look. And you brought up strength of schedule. Now, as a guy whose team is in the ACC, I've been watching the ACC for a while, and the ACC really hasn't been that strong. Now, there have been strong teams here or there, obviously with Clemson having a great run in the 2010s. And you've had some good teams that have put up some good seasons, but nothing that has been world-beating since Florida State won the national title in 2013, outside of Clemson, I mean. And when you look at this year, it was not a particularly strong ACC. Now, the funny part is everybody wants to give Florida State the credit for, well, you can't give them or discredit them for who they played. But man, everybody's on the Notre Dame train for playing ACC teams, right? So like that same energy doesn't go to Florida State, but it seems to go to Notre Dame. So that's one part of it that I thought was interesting. But also, I think you're right. The committee has built in a way for them to sort of get out of jail free card when there is an injury. And as much as I hate it, because you never want to see somebody lose their job because they got hurt. But it definitely comes down to, when you're trying to pick 4 teams, is the Florida State without their star quarterback worthy, or one of the best teams? and it's a hard decision that they have to make. But I still think that the NCAA put themselves in this position. You and I have been advocating for a larger playoff field since we started this show. We're going to get it next year. So this doesn't really matter. But I also agree with you that I think that they did the right thing. Not an easy thing, but they did the right thing. And if I'm a Florida State fan today, yes, I'm definitely pissed. How could you not be? You went 13-0. You did everything that was asked of you. The problem is, in my opinion, the system screwed you over, not you in particular. I mean, obviously an injury, but they're more than just their quarterback. That's the way I see it anyway. And a lot of people are rooting for Alabama to lose because they see Alabama as the team that shouldn't be in there. Well, Alabama played a lot of really tough schools. They had some really tough matchups of non-ranked schools, and they were trying to point to Texas for that too. We talked about Wyoming and some other games. But man, when you beat Georgia, who hadn't lost in like 30-something games, two-time defending national title, to win the SEC with one loss, and their only loss was to Texas, who, by the way, made a statement and won the Big 12 and deserved to get in as well. How could you leave Alabama out? I understand money and ratings and all that stuff, but I don't know if, I mean, Florida State, in my opinion, is one of those schools that is recognizable, especially during the Bobby Bowden era, right? I get it. Conspiracy theorists all around, but I'm just a little bit tired of it at this point because if Florida State goes out and beats Georgia, fine, right? Claim the national title. But also, nobody was calling for this in 2017 when it was UCF. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, 100%. And a lot of people like to throw out there that Alabama was, Auburn had Alabama dead to rights.
They did, though.
In the
We
Iron
both
Bowl.
agreed, right?
And yeah, and like totally agree with that. And but my stance on that is, but you know what? Like great teams find a way to win in those moments, and that's what they did. And just like the folks at Florida State, because they come out and be like, hey, I understand Florida wasn't that great this year, but that's a rivalry game, man. So like in that sense, you can use rivalry game as an excuse of why it's a good win, but you're not going to use rivalry game as a reason that the Auburn Alabama game was competitive.
Not consistent energy across the board is my problem.
Sure, yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy in the arguments, and I think the process of selecting the teams is you should sit there and say, okay, if these teams were on a neutral field today, does Florida State have a chance? Do I believe Florida State can beat Team X if they were on a neutral field today, like the day they're making the selections? And if that's the question you're asking, not only are the four teams in the playoff, I think, ahead of them, I think you could justify putting Georgia, Oregon, and Ohio State ahead of them if that were the case. Because if someone were to force me to put $100 on those 7 teams against Florida State, like I would bet on those 7 teams. You know what I mean? It sounds like you got to bet on this game. All 7 of those bets are going on the 4 playoff teams: Georgia, Oregon, and Ohio State.
I won't remind everybody
with confidence.
Yeah, I won't remind everybody what your pick of the week record
That's
is
fine.
at this point.
That's
and
fine.
So just for everybody who's wondering that, but the only one I would actually say is Ohio State. Maybe not. I don't know. But then again, I've been down on Ohio State this year, so maybe
See, that's
it's a
the only
bias on
one
my
that's
part.
the only one you could even go like,
Yeah.
you know?
Oregon, yeah, I agree. But I'll tell you what, man. So shifting away from Florida State. Look, Florida State is not in the playoff. And say what you want about it. It is what it is at this point, right? You're going to get your day. You're going to play Georgia, who is highly motivated. I would say even more motivated because Kirby Smart is like, wow, I went from number 1 to number 6, losing the first game in like 30-something games. So he's going to have bulletin board material. As soon as they were number 6, that went up in the locker room. Georgia is going to come out gangbusters, and we'll see, right? Florida State. Well, the thing is, though, man, is Georgia, if they beat the pants off Florida State, people will say, yeah, but they're their second-string quarterback. And that's the entire argument almost for why, right? So there's going to be there's hypocrisy, a lack of consistency. That's all that I want, right, is consistency in your argument. And here there is not that. And we're going to get to something else a little bit later that has the same problem. But when we look at this playoff field, you saw the video. Many people saw the video. Michigan, when they found out they were playing Alabama, not the reaction that other teams had. And I'm not saying that that's indicative that they're afraid of Alabama, but they were hoping to play a second-string quarterback, no doubt.
Yeah, 100%. That's not a team that you want to play right now. Not a team you want to play in a playoff setting, especially when you're going to give Nick Saban a month to prepare. Um, and that's even Tommy Reese, like I've had my criticisms of the guy, but if you had to, if you give Tommy Reese a month to prepare, like the guy's really smart and he's going to have a hell of a game plan in place. There's no doubt about that. I see that thing today that Alabama just hired Michigan's former linebackers coach that got fired from Michigan just a
Saw
few
that.
weeks ago or whatever over the sign stealing thing. Like Nick Saban's playing chess, man. And
Gamesmanship.
yeah, and I don't he's the GOAT. He's great. I know those people don't like him, but like the dude is a winner and there's no denying that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give credit where credit is due. I mean, this was an Alabama team that even we said wasn't as good as years past. Now, Budge came on here, week 3 and said we're comparing them to other Alabama teams, but nationally, they're still a very, very good football team. And what they did week in and week out is they kept winning, right? I think if Florida State had made statement wins, right? Because I think the closest comparison that I used was Ohio State from 2014 when I think it was JT Barrett went out and Cardell Jones came in. They ended up winning the national title with their third string quarterback, but they had statement wins with
Right.
that third string quarterback. And the committee looked at that and said, okay, this is a team that can win and compete with this. And I just don't know if Florida State was going to be able to do that. And so obviously you're Michigan and you're like, okay, now we got to play Alabama. So now we've got to play a guy, or I've got to coach against the guy who's seen everything, won national championships, not afraid. Whereas I think if Florida State gets in, this is the first kind of real test for Mike Norvell, right? So now Jim Harbaugh is like, all right, I don't have any signs now, and I joke on that one. But my point is like, this is a different beast entirely. And on the other side of the bracket, Washington, in my opinion, is being completely disrespected.
Yeah, no, I feel like no one's talking about Washington, but if I'm Washington, I kind of want it that way.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I don't want to be. They've kind of flown under the radar all year. Right here, man. I said I thought they were run out of steam. I thought they were run out of gas, and I thought that Oregon was going to come in and make a statement in the Pac-12 championship game. And did they prove me wrong?
Well, let me tell you though, right? So that game kind of was a microcosm for what you've spoken to, where they came out looking great, they faded, but they weathered the storm. In boxing, they call it, weathering the storm.
Sure.
Where then they ended up taking Oregon into deep water and they outlasted them. They had a response for every time that Oregon kept making a comeback. That's a sign of a good team, right? You said that about Alabama with Auburn.
Yeah.
Washington had an answer every single time this season, every single time they were shown adversity. And that's what you want. And I think right now they're staring at Texas, who obviously has a lot of talent, but Texas is getting the nod because I think they're Texas. That's just my opinion. Whereas Washington beat a lot of really, really tough football teams and didn't struggle in that many football games this year, if you really think about it.
No, you're absolutely correct. They probably had outside of Michigan, because Michigan didn't really play a close game for the most part. I mean, the Ohio State game was close, but not really. Like the issue was never in doubt. It just, I think that, because we knew like Ohio State couldn't move the ball, period, and everybody knew it. And so even though the score wasn't lopsided, the issue wasn't in doubt. And so Washington probably had the most consistent season, I think you could say, and that's impressive when you're dealing with 18 to 22, 23-year-old young men with school and just the distractions that come along with all those things, to be able to have that consistency over 3 months, 4 months, not even talking about the off season and the preparation that goes into things. It's really impressive, and I'm excited to watch. I think we got 2 great semifinals, absolutely like must-watch TV semifinals, in my opinion. And I have one question for you before I hand it back over to you. Do you think that what happened at TCU last year in the national championship game kind of like played into how they handled things this year, as far as like, listen, like we can't take a flyer, or we can't take a risk on putting a team that appears to deserve to be there in and have what happened last year happen?
Yes, I do think that played into it a little bit. And I think that played into why I don't want to say Florida State didn't get in, because Florida State had something that TCU didn't, right? TCU came in and lost their conference championship game. The only loss that they had was at the end of the season. Well, Florida State didn't have that. Now, they didn't have their star quarterback, but the theoretically, your backup, this is not like the NFL, right? Like in college. In the NFL, most backups have established themselves as a backup because they have shown that they can't be a starter in the league. Whereas in college, the guys that you have on the bench, don't forget, Nick Saban won a national title benching Jalen Hurts and putting in Tua, right? So theoretically, the backups on Florida State are guys that are up and coming who are going to come in behind Jordan Travis over the course of the next few years, and they should be the idea is that they'd be ready to win a national championship, right, with this team. So to me, it's not quite like the NFL in that way. But I think that last year TCU lost in this game, and the committee, I think, you're right. They kind of said a little bit of a pity inclusion. Now, they beat Michigan, right?
Right.
They lost in the national championship game, but you could make the argument that everybody would have lost in the national championship
I was going
game.
to say that. Yeah, the counter argument to what I said is Georgia would have done that to pretty much anyone else.
Maybe not quite so lopsided, but they would have won, right? I think they still would have beaten Michigan, and I think that's just the way that it was going to go last year. But I do think it makes them hesitant because everybody was using TCU as the reason you don't let a, quote, deserving team get in.
No, I think you're right. And it'll, the thing is that there's people that say, well, a 12-team playoff, now the 13th team is going to be complaining. And I don't think that that's the case. And this is why. Because no one believes that the 13th team actually has a chance to win the national championship.
No.
You could make an argument that the 5th, this year, you could make an argument that the 5th, 6th, 7th ranked teams could win a national championship this year. You know what I'm saying? Like, those are valid arguments. It's like, hey, we just need in and we have a shot. The 12th ranked team in the country isn't going to win the national championship. But and they say, well, why do you go to a 12-team playoff then if the 12th team is never, is not going to win the national championship? My answer is because it's more freaking entertaining.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's more football. It's more entertaining. We're going to see playoff games on campus, and college football games on a college campus that is in my opinion, the number one sports setting across all sports platforms, whatever. College football on a college campus, number one. And we're gonna get that with the highest of stakes next year, and I cannot wait, man.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think that people, when they say, or people have talked about, oh, it's all about money, in some ways it is, right? It is about money. It is about clicks. It is about who's going to be viewing these games, because the NCAA at the end of the day needs people to watch these games. And I think when you look at the names that have been included here, I think the reason why Washington is getting so disrespected is because Washington is not a team that people care about outside of the West Coast. But people know Michigan, they know Alabama, they know Texas. These are teams that have been perennially good and perennially have moved the needle. Florida State is a team that has had kind of a lull period for the last 10 years. So I can see people's arguments, but when it comes to 12 teams, you're expanding it out to the point that teams get a chance, because you're going to have teams that are going to buck the system with a 4-team playoff. They were going to have situations where they were going to have to make a tough decision, just like this year. If this were a 6-team playoff even, they would have said, sure, put Florida State and Georgia in there. We'll see what happens. Because Georgia could have run the table and won the national championship. Oregon could have run the table and won the national championship. Could Ole Miss have done that? Could
Probably
Louisville have done that?
No.
Right? And these are teams that are getting into that. Penn State? These are teams in that 12, 13 range. And yes, you're going to have teams that are going to complain. The 65th or whatever it is team in the NCAA tournament complains. If they made it 102, the 103rd team would complain. You're always going to have complainer. That's why I have the thumbnail for this. Stop whining, because like these fan bases are just whining at this point. It is what it is. Whatever the reasons are, it is what it is. And you have to kind of go and win the game. Now, for Florida State, they're looking toward next season. Jordan Travis is gone. He's already said that. Now this is a time for their backup quarterback, or their third string quarterback to get valuable reps in a super high profile game against a super good team. And it's going to be invaluable. Even if they get smoked, lots of tape to watch. Invaluable.
No, 100%. And as you were talking, I'm like, man, I guarantee you, because this year a larger playoff seems like it's so obvious. The situation this year like justifies a larger playoff, but there have been seasons like last year even where you had one team that was pretty much head and shoulders above everybody else. And it's like, why do you have to have 12 teams? So this team's going to win no matter how many teams you put in there. Sure, but guess what? Like 2 through 12, those are going to be some really good, entertaining football games and intriguing matchups that you probably would never see otherwise. And then so the counterpoint to that is like, well, that's why they play the bowl games. Well, guess what? These guys opt out of these bowl games. No one's opting out of a playoff game. You're going to get the best version of each team. You don't get that in the bowl season. And I know that's something we're going to talk about if you want to start moving in that direction. But
go for it.
I think that outside of the two semifinal games that are part of the college football playoff and the New York 6 game or the New Year's 6 games, New Year's 6 games for the most part, because I know there's the Florida State Georgia game, like neither team wants to be there. And so no matter what the outcome is, there's going to be some sort of like, well, they didn't care, this team didn't care, whatever. And you're always going to have that in some cases. Well, at least currently, moving forward, that probably won't be the case. But the whole aura around these bowl games has really taken on a new life, in my opinion. I know once upon a time these games were highly revered and people really got into them and they were competitive and people didn't opt out. Where now we have a lot of opt-outs because of the transfer portal, because the guy's leaving to go to the NFL, which I understand. I don't fault these people for that, and I got to take on fan responses to some of that stuff coming up here in a little bit. But bowl season sort of functions as like the preseason now, because with the opt-outs and people leaving for the NFL, transfer portal, etc., you're getting younger players that are getting a chance to play meaningful football. When otherwise, a backup like Notre Dame, put two quarterbacks names together. Sam Hartman is leaving, so Steve Angeli is going to start the bowl game. Now, yes, everybody knows Riley Leonard came. He's going to be the guy next year. But this at least gives Steve Angeli the opportunity to, prove that, hey, I can compete and at least put myself in position to still be number 2 and moving forward, be the starter in the future. Or if he does choose to transfer, because Notre Dame does have some very good quarterbacks behind him and coming in behind him, if he does decide to transfer, he's had an opportunity to go out there and put his game on film, right? Like you were mentioning. And there's a lot of guys across the country at various positions that are going to have the opportunity to do the same exact thing. And it's an audition for a starting spot next year, an audition to put yourself on the path to starting. Or if you do decide to leave, you've got meaningful film that you can share with other teams around the country to set yourself up for success moving forward. Because the results, for the most part, don't matter. Now, yes, like Notre Dame, I want Notre Dame to win the bowl game over Oregon State because it'd be nice to get to 10 wins. It's a nice round number. It's kind of one of those milestone benchmark things where it's like, well, hey, 10-win season. You know what I mean? And I think that, so it's meaningful in that sense. But most of these games, who wins and loses, like a preseason NFL game, doesn't really matter. It's more about development, seeing what guys got, putting guys in position to be successful, to improve. And that's I think we just have to accept that that's what it is now. And that's okay. That's totally okay. But I think we as a whole, as a college football community, we need to quit pretending that it's more than that.
I think what makes the college game different than the NFL is that even in the middle of the season, next season is on your mind when you're a head coach, because you're always looking to get the next big recruit, the next recruiting class. And one of the ways in which you can do that once the season is over is evaluating the talent that you have on your current roster. And so if all the guys that are going to transfer enter the portal and guys that are going to opt out because they're going to the NFL are out, now what you're left with are guys that are probably going to be vying for spots on your team next year. And now when you look at what they have, you start putting film together, as you said. And when you're recruiting, you already kind of know what you want to recruit for anyway. I'll give you an example of Virginia Tech, right? Earlier this season, I said that I thought it was a mistake that they started Grant Wells. And I understood why they started him. He was a senior, but I said they need to get Drones in there as soon as possible because they need to get him reps. Grant Wells got hurt this year. I don't know how hurt he got. I'm not here to speculate. But Drones got in and never gave up the position. And as you saw over the course of the season, obviously they had their hiccups. Whenever they played a good team, they looked crappy. But they put up 40-something against Boston College on the road. They whooped the hell out of UVA 55-17. You saw that they were starting to put things together. This is invaluable information, invaluable experience that they have now. And I think the bowl games are kind of the same way because the players that are in there see the bowl game as an opportunity, right? It's a heightened opportunity for them. Virginia Tech is playing Tulane in the Military Bowl. Tulane was an 11-win team this year. They were a 12-win team last year. This is a talented football team. This is a benchmark for these players that are left there now. And it's a benchmark for Brent Pry to say, okay, this is what I have against a really talented squad on the other side, who, by the way, isn't at their full strength, of course, but the talent that's left is talented. This is an 11-win football team, right? You don't win 11 games not having enough talent top to bottom on your football squad. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. And these coaches, too, put yourself in a position of a guy who maybe could be close to the hot seat, right? Who hasn't really delivered. Now you're like, all right, what do I have on this team? Because next year is even more important for me because that could be my job, right? Coach Prime got a lot of shit because they only won 4 games. If you don't think that he would use a bowl game for that, then you're out of your mind, right? Because he was using everything that he had, every piece of information at his disposal. Matt Rule's another guy, right? If they won 6 games, he would have been using that to build. That's how these coaches build a dynasty. That's how they get there. Saban went 6-6 in his first season at Alabama. Everybody forgets that. 6-6. The bowl game that they played that year probably told him a lot. Okay, this is what I need in my football team. And I know that I'm rambling, and I know that people want tradition. It's gone. I hate to break it to people. Like, it's gone. You and I can romanticize about it because we watched in a time in which tradition mattered, right? Playing for your team, playing for the bowl game mattered. It's a business now. These kids are in business for themselves. And I know that that makes people uncomfortable, but it is what it is. You have to find the parts of college football that you can romanticize. There's still a lot to romanticize. The traditions are still there. You have to look for them a little bit harder now, but they're still there, and it's still there. But the bowl season is not that. The bowl season is prepared for next season. It's to get these guys prepared for their next move and if they're going to transfer. Because if you go out there and have a bad game during a bowl game, you may want to find yourself another squad because you may not be there. You know what I mean? So, like, I'm with you on this. I think the hang up that people have is the tradition. I'm sorry. It's done. And I'm here to tell you that.
I truthfully, man, like, I don't really get the tradition of it. Like, it's so weird to me that they used to crown a national champion in college football without playing a actual defined championship game. It's just the most absurd thing to me.
The AP,
Because
the press
would
decided
choose
who
the
the
national
national champion
champion.
was.
My goodness, like, could you imagine? It's like, could you imagine if we let the press vote for like who the president is? You know what I
Fake
mean?
news.
It's like, and that's it. Like, yeah, like there's an AP poll for who the president's going to be, and like no one else gets a logical say in the process. But it's so weird that that's how things were because it seems like it makes so much sense. And this popped into my head, and I didn't get a chance to squeeze it in earlier when we were talking about the playoff. But I saw like several people mention this, but I saw a video where like Drew Brees was like, "Hey, this is really easy. Like, there's zero reason why the committee can't say, hey, listen up, emergency 16 playoff. 1 and 2 have a bye. And, let's play Florida State and Alabama, Georgia and Texas. You guys play each other. The winners will move on to play Michigan and Washington, respectively. And because I guarantee you, you're going to be able to find somewhere that's going to want to host those 2 games. No problem. The revenue they would generate would be great. I understand. I'm sure that the logistics of TV present some issues as far as people, finding a time slot and a date and so on and so forth. But like, I think there's so much money to be made in that like it would trump whatever else was going on. And then, I think the other thing that would, which granted it's not happening, but one of the biggest pushbacks that would hold it up if they attempted to would be the Fiesta Bowl or whoever, these people that run the bowl games that now they just lost Georgia and Florida State to a playoff game would be pissed because now their revenue is going to be down or whatever. They're going to take lesser
Yes.
teams. And that's what does suck about it. See, I think the 12-team playoff is going to, yes, it's about money, but it's already about money. That's what's silly is like, it's, it's just a money grab. Well, it's already a money grab, man. Like, so let's at least make it the most logical thing we can.
Everything's a money grab now, right? Just get on board with it. But I just want to read some of these bowl names to you for people now, because if you think it's a money grab now, the minor bowls definitely kind of are. Like when we talk about tradition, the tradition of playing in bowl games, I'm sure that had something to do because if you think about all the old bowl games, right, they're played at these iconic stadiums, which are archaic now, but like the Cotton Bowl, Peach Bowl, right, and the Rose Bowl. So like they all mattered for the pomp and circumstance of all of that. But now today we have the Cricket Celebration Bowl, right? So that's a good one. This one actually got me. Avocados from Mexico Cure Bowl. I don't know what that means. I'm not going to read that one. The Starco Brands LA Bowl. LA gets their own bowl. I guess that's a thing. And ironically, UCLA is in it playing at SoFi, so they just move like right down the street to go play in a bowl game. Like what the hell is that? The famous Toastery Bowl. That would be Old Dominion, a team I've seen play in person against Western Kentucky. The Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl. You see what I'm talking about here?
Yeah,
Roofclaim.com Boca Raton Bowl.
And
It used to be just the Boca Raton Bowl. Now it's the Roofclaim.com Boca Raton Bowl. It's absurd. And it's gone, right? That's why I say the tradition's gone. I don't mean to be Debbie Downer here, but that part of it's gone.
Yes, let's bury it, man. It's over, and it's moving on, and it's gonna be better, and that's okay. And Notre Dame, they're playing in the Toney the Tiger Sun Bowl.
Is that a true thing?
I believe that's what it is. The Toney the Tiger. It might be like I don't know if it's a Toney the Tiger Kellogg Sun Bowl or if it's just Toney the Tiger Sun Bowl.
That's
whatever,
great.
but it's like, that's great.
It is great.
It's just hilarious, man. Like,
Wonder why
I've heard
people
some
are
of those.
opting out.
You know what's funny though? It's not just these bowl games, man, because like boosters on these campuses are out of control. And hey, if you got people that are just willing to throw their money at you, I understand why they take it. But the manner in which that they give these people something for their money is hilarious, because like at Notre Dame, like Marcus Freeman is not the Notre Dame head football coach. He is the Dick Corbett head football coach. Like every coach, him, the defense coordinator, whatever, they are like sponsored by somebody. It's the such and such family defensive coordinator, the such and such name, Al Golden, blah blah blah, defensive coordinator, so and so wide receivers coach, and it's hilarious. But again, like if people are willing to pony up money for that, take it.
Well, I have been sponsored by Hershey's chocolate for the last couple of weeks, as this is the holiday season, soon to be sponsored by any type of baked good, and I still got this little phlegm going on, which is just awful. But before we move on to the NFL, because we got a lot to cover with the NFL, you had some thoughts on the treatment of players who are transferring, and I wanted to ask you, because you have a lot of players now who are juniors who people think are going to leave. I'm going to use Maserati Marv as one of the examples of this, but Ohio State is looking at their future without him, and they're like, man, this guy's good. By the way, should have won the Heisman, but that's another here or that's neither here nor there. Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, deserving, sure.
Sure, right? But I was like, wow. Like when you look at the guys on that list, I mean, all quarterbacks except for Marv, and Marv was the only reason that they were as good as they were, but we'll just leave that. We can
Ohio State would have lost 3 or 4 games if they didn't have Marvin Harrison Jr.
100%.
Man.
So they're looking at him leaving, and they're like, hey, how much is enough for you to come back? $20 million is what they're offering him. And it's like now, depending on who you are, I mean, Marv, I think, is looking to make more money in the NFL. I think that's probably the viable avenue for him. But like, let's take, I know she's not a football player, but Caitlin Clark, right? She's making bank at Iowa, and she's got 1 more year of eligibility left. And it's like, why would I go to the WNBA when the salaries are down?
Yeah, like, okay, not to. I know you're a avid fan and supporter of the WNBA. And I'm not anti WNBA, but I just like to call a spade. And I think that if you're Caitlin Clark and like Iowa's like, hey, we're gonna give you $2 million to stay, and it's like you can take $2 million to stay and play at Iowa, or take 250,000 to go play in the WNBA in a quarter filled arena, or you can play. I mean, they probably draw great crowds. At Iowa for women's basketball. Like, why wouldn't you stay in that environment for
Yeah,
that money and be? Because guess what, man? Like, she's in the national spotlight right now. The moment
she
she
is.
goes to the WNBA, that's gonna end, dude. Like, sadly, that's just the truth.
Yes.
It's no longer gonna be a story, right? Because that's again college sports in general. Like, there's just so much more to it, so much more like passion and tradition and everything built around it. And some of that gets lost when you move on to the pros, man, no matter if it's the NFL or Major League Baseball or the WNBA. So
Yeah.
it is interesting though, like, a bag of 20 mil, dude. Like, and I get, yeah, let's say he goes out and blows out his knee or something. Like, yeah, you got $20 million, but you probably could have had hundreds of millions of dollars had you,
Yes.
go to the NFL and have a great career.
I think in football, it's less likely to happen because of the nature of the sport. So Marv needs to go to the NFL now to bank in on how good he is, right? He's at the height of the hype that he has, because you never know if the next down is your last. Whereas Caitlin Clark could have a catastrophic injury, but in basketball, and specifically, I think she plays guard, right? She doesn't have the kind of wear and tear. Nobody's trying to tackle her on the court, at least not yet. So
Right.
I think that there is a difference there, but you wanted to talk about transfers because obviously players have been transferring left and right. Dylan Gabriel going to Oregon, I think, is going to be a lot of fun. And Notre Dame replaces Sam Hartman by getting Riley Leonard from Duke, which is a huge get. But a lot of players also transfer out too, because they're looking at the landscape the same as the coaches. And they're like, I don't think I'm going to get playing time here. I want to go somewhere where I can play. One thing I'm glad about is that they have the flexibility to do that. They didn't used to have that. They used to have to give up a year of eligibility, a little bit more flexibility now. But you specifically have thoughts, I think, on how the fan bases treat these people.
Yeah, and one thing too, like real quick about Marv is like people are considering that he would be going on his third new quarterback in 3 years. You know what I mean? So it's like he building a new rapport, all that stuff. It's like, why would you want to go through that again? But yeah, going into, I was like triggered the other day, man, and like there's just a lot going on as a Notre Dame fan, and I'm sure it's happening across the country. There's a lot going on, and you just the reactions that are coming from the fan bases are just absurd, man. Like, I get passion, but it's just the way that people react and respond to these things. I saw when Sam Hartman announced, he made this nice video and stuff, and like by all accounts, Sam Hartman's a great human being. He's fully embraced the whole Notre Dame thing. He didn't have a great season, but like it wasn't for lack of trying. And I don't think you can question his character or his effort. And so he says he's leaving, and or opting out of the bowl game. That's what it is. I think he's going to the NFL or going to go in the draft and hopefully be like a great backup quarterback or something for 10 years. But he opted out of the bowl game. And I saw someone post a picture, and it was a picture of Sam Hartman in the Notre Dame uniform, and it had a circle with a line through it over the C on his jersey for captain. And I'm like, are you serious? It triggers me so much because I just want to be like, so tell me this. Like, you've never quit a job, you've never made a commitment to somebody and then like backed out of it, or like went a different direction for some reason or another. Like, you've literally like honored and I would even say that Sam Hartman's not honoring his word or honoring his commitment by doing this. Like, I don't think that at all. But like most people at some point in time in their lives have made a commitment to something and then not followed through with it. You know what I mean? And unless you are absolutely perfect in that aspect, like, you have no room at all to be pointing a finger at anybody. And especially a guy that seems like one of the most likable people that you could ever want to be around. Seems to do things the right way. He's positive. Like I said, he embraced the Notre Dame thing. Like, he could have come in this year and been like, listen, I'm just here to get through this season, cash in. But like he behaved as if he'd been at Notre Dame for 4 seasons. Like, he really took it all in, man, and was all in on Notre Dame, and I loved that. So it frustrates the hell out of me that people sit there just like that, man, and throw these guys under the bus. I don't think it's fair at all. Fair. There you go. It just seems so absurd. Drew, what's up, buddy? Good to see you stopping in. And Joe and I saw you said hi earlier. Glad you guys stopped by. But yeah, and there's so many other things. Like, I get on this message board I've told you about. I read through the stuff these people say, and it's just the most infuriating stuff that I've ever read. Like, I have to just walk away. I'm proud of myself. I told you, I'm proud of myself that I didn't engage with these people, because I was like, I wanted to so bad, but I'm like, you know what? This is what stupid people do. They drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. So I'm just going to walk away.
But this is what we've talked about before, about the toxic nature of fandom and the toxic nature of how many fans feel that the team, the players, owe something to them personally, right? So Sam Hartman, you say that he's not a captain of this team. That's a total horseshit. And we both know this, right? Because this is a meaningless game. You might think it's meaningful. It's meaningful for next season, which, by the way, Sam Hartman is not going to be a part of, because
Right.
he's not going to be on this team. He can't be on this team, right? There's no way that he can be on this team. So what is he looking at? And what are players like Sam Hartman looking at? They're looking at the future, the same way as what Marcus Freeman should be doing. Let's hope that he's doing that, and he's looking for that running back to give the ball to on 1st and 10 next season. But they're looking to the future. Sam Hartman is closer to the end of his career than he is the beginning of his career. He's played a lot of football over his time. So if he can save himself potential injury risk, he's going to do that. And every other player is going to do that. Now, these these fans who are saying this, they've never actually sacrificed anything in their life this way. And I can say that I've never done that, but I'm also not going to judge these players for this type of thing, because they don't owe anything to us, right? They owe it to the university. And I think that Sam Hartman has given to the university. I think that by even going there in the first place, he gave something to the university. And how much more value are they going to get out of him? What is he going to get? And what is Marcus Freeman going to get out of winning that bowl game? Nothing. Absolutely
Yeah.
nothing.
No,
Nothing.
I mean, and there's a lot more to gain by playing the two young guys. And I don't even know if they'll play both of them. I hope they do. But there's a lot more value to gain from that, and to see where they're at. Even if you got Leonard coming in, like you'd like to know that you've got somebody that's a solid, reliable backup that you can count on. And we saw Steve Angeli a little bit this year, but not in meaningful minutes. I mean, it was garbage time, and so it's it'll be. It just pisses me off, truthfully. I mean, because like Audric Estime, he could have come back if he wanted to. He's leaving to go to the NFL. And another interesting thing about Notre Dame is, and this says a lot about Notre Dame in multiple ways, two very different ways. Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner are both returning to Notre Dame this season to finish out their degrees. Tyler Buckner is going to play lacrosse. Drew Pine is not going to participate in any sport. So the two quarterbacks Notre Dame had on their roster last season are no longer even playing the sport of football. So what's that say about the fact that those were their two best options last year? And Buckner got hurt, obviously. But what's that say about the school, man? And that's not something anybody really argues about or debates. Everybody knows it's a great school, but these guys are coming back to finish their Notre Dame degrees because that piece of paper means a lot. And especially the Notre Dame network and everything else. And they preach a lot of that 4 for 40. That's their thing. They're like, the Notre Dame family, the Notre Dame network can take you places for life and could set you up long-term way more than football or any of this other stuff.
Yeah, that's very, very true. But fans are just irrational. And speaking of irrational fan bases, now I want to preface this, right? I want to preface this that I don't dislike this fan base. I actually don't like dislike many fan bases outside of a few. I'm softening up on Notre Dame because of my friendship with you, but I can't speak for the rest of Notre Dame fandom. But let's move on to the Chiefs, okay? The Kansas City Chiefs are a team that we've talked about a lot over the last year or so, and They have a great quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. They've had great players. They've won 2 Super Bowls. Everything's great, right? They have this game against the Bills, who that was touted as like the matchup of the week. They've had some great games against each other, including one of the best playoff games ever with that back and forth matchup. And Kansas City loses this past weekend. And they lose because of a couple of things. But what people are mainly focusing on is this offside call on Kadarius Toney. And I want to talk about this because you got triggered by the Sam Hartman thing. I got triggered by this because I'm watching this unfold on the internet, which is a terrible place to watch things unfold. It's like watching Doomsday. And so many Chiefs fans have been so whiny and so just unreasonable in their takes on this situation. I get it, right? You don't want the refs to dictate the end of a football game. It happens though, right? Because calls need to be made when they need to be made. But what's pissing me off the most is that Chiefs fandom is honing in on these refs and nobody's looking at Kadarius Toney, right? Nobody's looking at him. And I'm like, this guy, not just here, but in other places too, has screwed you over in so many different ways. And Chiefs fans are starting to get toward that insufferable nature, the way that Patriots fans got for me. And I'm a Patriots guy, right? And I just got so triggered by this because I'm like, I get it, right? It's a nitpicky kind of call. And you can put screenshots all you want up of, oh, look at this guy who was offsides, this, and this. The fact of the matter is the Kansas City Chiefs are a flawed football team this year, and they just can't handle it. It has nothing to do with this offsides. It's just that the Chiefs are not the Chiefs, and they can't handle it.
Yeah, and another thing that when you talk about these fans, everybody thinks it's so black and white. It has to be one person's fault or the other. There's a lot of things that could be true about the situation. It could be true that Kadarius Toney was offsides. It could be true that the line judge didn't tell him he was offsides before the ball was snapped, which is kind of a common thing that occurs. It could be true that the overwhelming majority of the time, the official will like tell the coach and like warn him, like, hey, he's getting a little up there, tell him to back off. Because Andy Reid said like that's the first time he's ever seen it called without a warning of some kind ahead of time. So that could be true. It could be true that the Chiefs are just frustrated, man. And I think that that's a big part of it. I told my dad, I said, I think like the blow up by Patrick Mahomes and stuff there at the end of the game, it was just a culmination of kind of what's been going on the last month with that team and the frustration that's built up just towards the product they're putting on the field. They're obviously struggling. They are flawed, like you said. That offensively, outside of Travis Kelce, he doesn't have a lot of weapons. He's out there trying to do it on his own for the most part, which you can't do, man. And I think that, and one argument I've seen people like trying, like pulling clips out of the woodwork, man, of like, what about this time when this team lined up in the neutral zone? What about this time when this team? It doesn't, you know what? Guess
Doesn't
what?
matter.
It was illegal then, and it's illegal this time. The difference is it didn't get called that time. It got called this time. Like, it doesn't matter, And I get being pissed about it. Sure. And how often though? How often? Because people are mad, right? Because the point in time in the game when it happened, it's like, how do you make that call then? Type of thing. But like, how often as fans are we like, you need to officiate the last minute of the game the same way you officiate the first minute of the game? Especially you see it in basketball. It's like they swallow their whistles in the last minute of a close game, because they don't want to make that call, or on a Hail Mary and stuff like that. There's passing interference. There's freaking assault and battery that happens in the end zone on Hail Marys, and there's not a penalty flag to be seen.
Unless you're the Jets.
Right. And it's hilarious that people want to sit here and they want to cherry pick their little things that they feel like they can use to justify their position on being upset about the call. Like, the bottom line is Kadarius Toney was offsides. He got called offsides. And it was that call impacted the outcome of the game.
It did, right? But I get it. But like, the Chiefs, how many times have they been benefited by a call at the right time?
Oh,
AFC
yeah.
Championship games last year.
Yes, dude, a
Super
lot.
Bowl, right? And so this is my problem. My problem is consistency. Like, I understand your frustration. I totally get it. But Jesus Christ, the guy was offsides, okay? And somebody said, well, look at how many times he was offsides during the game. And I was like, maybe the refs looked and said the same thing. Jesus Christ, this guy can't line up onside. Why should I warn him? This is the 6th time. Psh, you're offsides. And everybody's like, yeah, but the play ended up being this historic thing. You don't call a penalty based off of how a play ends. That's not how this works.
Yes, I agree. And like it's like in basketball when you see they wait and like see if the shot goes in sometimes if they're gonna call a foul or not, and that's infuriating. And it's so frustrating because you're right. They've had so many instances or cases of favorable officiating over the last several years. And it's funny, like someone just needs to tell Chiefs fans, like, hey, like you're
It
not good enough
happens.
you're not good enough to get the benefit of the doubt this year.
Not this year.
That's what someone should say. Because I guarantee you, like they would blow their lid.
Be mad that your receivers can't catch a cold, right? Be mad that you don't have playmakers outside of Travis Kelce. And you're making, I hate to say this, Patrick Mahomes look mid almost,
Yeah,
right?
he's not. Yeah.
He's not at all. And the other thing that I want to talk about that I think is bullshit as well is people getting on Patrick Mahomes for what he said. Football, you're passionate. Tom Brady used to slam helmets, he used to do all these things, and everybody thought, man, what a competitor. But yeah, with Mahomes, look, you get these guys behind a microphone, even 30 minutes, even if you have a 30-minute cool off, like he's not going to cool off in 30 minutes. The only thing that I wished he hadn't done was say something to Josh Allen in that moment, because Josh Allen had nothing to do with that. But
Right.
Mahomes, being the classy guy that he is, the next day said, hey, look, I regret saying anything to Josh in that moment because his competitors, it's not Josh Allen's fault, right? It has nothing to do with Josh Allen. Josh Allen won that game. He made the plays. The thing is, though, even with that offsides call, they still couldn't convert. There were other times in the game, and people forget about this, there are other times when these penalties are called earlier in the game where it actually matters. People forget, that holding call in the second quarter that actually stalled our drive, that actually matters. What if you got points out of that one? It's not just at the end of the game, right? And I just think that there's no consistency here. But I want to ask you, though, because the Chiefs, I think, are flawed. And the Eagles, too, have looked flawed the last couple of weeks. Are these teams kind of drifting toward, maybe they're not as good as we thought they were? I think it's the Chiefs more than the Eagles because the Eagles have lost to 2 good football teams where the Chiefs have kind of struggled against just about everybody outside of a couple of games. I don't know. What do you think? Because the NFL is strange in this way where for most of the season, we're like, man, Eagles are great. 2 games in, we're like, huh.
Yeah. We've seen this before, right? Now, typically, I feel like the tipping point is a little earlier in the season than where we're at now. But like we've seen it with, what was it? Seattle a few years ago ran off like 7 or 8 straight, and everybody's like, my goodness, like they are dominant, whatever. And it's like they might have finished under 500. Like the wheels just fell off. Now, these situations aren't that dramatic, and these teams are in a much better position record-wise that they'll be okay. But they're certainly not playing their best football at the time of year that you would like to be. And I'd rather be playing good football now than in September. If I were these people. Now those games in September matter, that it all adds up. But I think you're right, though, that, it's not uncommon, man. Like I feel like the Ravens have been one of those teams at some point in time, not too long ago, where it was just like very dominant for like half the season and just like it fell apart.
The 49ers this year lost 3 in a row. And everybody was like, whoa, what happened? And then ever since they got all their pieces back, they had guys that were hurt, and now they look amazing, right? So
you think they're the best team in the league?
Oh, yeah, 100%. This actually gets to something that we could talk about. We could talk about a little later, but I think it's pertinent now when you ask me this question because the 49ers are okay. So I've never really seen a team quite like this in my lifetime. And I don't mean that to be hyperbolic, but you have a team that is unquestionably talented, defense, offense, and then you have this quarterback, Brock Purdy, who is unprecedented in a different way. And when you look at the quarterbacks in the league now, Brock Purdy, in my opinion, has changed the prism in which we look at evaluating quarterbacks. It's kind of weird, right? Because you and I probably a year ago, would have said, oh, we know who's good. We know who's not good, or who's superstar level, who's not superstar level. And now Brock Purdy comes in, Mr. Irrelevant. Last year we gave him a pass because we're like, wow, this guy really managed the offense. They choose him for their quarterback, and this year it's like, he's still managing the offense, but also making these baller throws that like not other like there's quarterbacks in the league who aren't making those throws right now. Like Bryce Young ain't making some of these throws that Brock Purdy is making, but he's also thrown to George Kittle and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Oh, and by the way, Christian McCaffrey in the backfield. So like that kind of matters. But Cam Newton recently, I don't know if you've heard this yet or have seen these comments, but he has his podcast. I think it's called 4th and 1. His wardrobe is amazing. Cam Newton is kind of amazing as a human being, but he had this to say about quarterbacks.
Brock Purdy, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, and really, Dak Prescott. These are game managers. They're not difference makers.
When you say game manager, I'm not asking you to go out and win the game. I'm just asking you not to lose.
Not to lose the game. Exactly. Listen, I don't give a damn what you do. You don't have to score every time. You just don't have to throw a pick every time either. If we're going to really call a spade, there's a difference between managers of the game and difference makers of a game.
Thoughts?
A lot to unpack there.
Yes.
As I'm listening, I'm like, okay, is it really so bad to be a game manager, a guy that doesn't turn the ball over, that makes the right decisions?
That's the hang up that everybody has, by the way, is the terminology of game manager is what I think people are really like, ooh, because, that has a connotation.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely does. But it's like the things that encompass or define a game manager, like those are things that you would, if you were to ask a coach, just like, hey, like what traits do you want out of a quarterback? Like, well, a guy that makes good decisions, a guy that doesn't turn the ball over, a guy that knows and understands the offense, that plays within the offense, all these things. Like, I think if you ask most coaches, like if they wanted to, it's like, hey, you can take the chance on a top 5 quarterback, or I can give you Brock Purdy, right? Like that caliber of quarterback. Like, and you're gonna, like, no matter what happens, like that's what you get for 10 years. So take it or leave it. Now, yes, higher ceiling probably with the top 5 draft pick, but way higher floor with the game manager. And I think, yeah, you want to win championships. And maybe there's people that believe the only way you can win championships is if you have a playmaker, a difference maker at quarterback. But guess how you keep your job for a really long time?
Win.
By winning the majority of your football games. Look at, Roethlisberger wasn't a game manager, but like, Mike Tomlin's been in Pittsburgh for a long time. I think that, look how long Marvin Lewis kept his job in Cincinnati with Andy Dalton, right? I mean,
game manager.
Just win enough to not get fired. I mean, at the end of the day, and yeah, if you can make a run here and there, you do it. I understand why people think you have to have that dynamic. The difference between being a perennial playoff team and being a championship contender is having that difference maker at quarterback. But even, I mean, how many guys have we seen that are difference makers that do it at that high of a level for a prolonged, like look at Cam Newton, man. Won Super Bowl, went to the Super Bowl one time. And now what?
Unquestionably great though, right?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. But it's like you had such a small window of time to capitalize on his dynamic playmaking ability where you could take you could even throw like a Matthew Stafford in the equation. I mean, even like Dak Prescott, like you can have those guys for 10 years and be putting yourself in a position to compete for championships consistently because it's like you don't have that roller coaster. I would take the consistency personally. But
you're very on record with that. I mean, you're very consistent, right? With wanting the guy who can consistently win. But all the quarterbacks that he named there, right? Tua, Brock Purdy, who else did he name? Dak Prescott. You could even throw in Russell Wilson. Right now, Russell Wilson is playing game management football, and it's winning football right now.
So Tua, Dak, and Brock Purdy.
Yes.
What do those three guys have that not every other quarterback in the NFL has?
Talent around them.
Yes,
And that's what I was
great
going to ask
talent
you.
around them.
Yes, exactly.
So they don't have to be dynamic playmakers.
No, and as a matter of fact, what would a dynamic player look like in this offense? Because don't forget, Kyle Shanahan tried that, right? He thought he was going to get Trey Lance, and it didn't work out. They went to within one throw of a Super Bowl win with Jimmy Garoppolo, who currently is injured, supposedly. But my point is, you don't necessarily need the dynamic guy in that same way that you probably felt like you used to. The dynamic guy makes up for your lack of talent in other places, right? I mean, you can look at the Eagles with Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, I think, has a skill set that's a little bit different. Lamar Jackson, a little bit different. I think that their rushing prowess changes how you can do things with your football team. But all those guys, like right now, if the Cowboys win a Super Bowl this year, it'll be because Dak Prescott did exactly what Cam Newton is talking about. Didn't turn the ball over, which has been a problem that he has had when he's had to be the guy. And they seem to have found the right mix of talent for him to maximize his skill set. Nothing wrong with that. It's the game manager. The way that he uses it is a negative connotation. People say, ooh, because you know who they think of? They think of Alex Smith. Alex Smith won a lot of football games, by the way.
No, absolutely. And like we just talked about it, and Jonah maybe is alluding to it. I'm just kind of catching out of the corner of my eye. But like we just talked about a guy who I think a lot of people would consider a dynamic playmaker. And his season's not going super great right now. And why is that? Why is Patrick Mahomes' season not going super great right now? Because he doesn't have the pieces around him that he's had in prior seasons. You know what I mean? And like
Yes.
that's the difference. And you know, you mentioned Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson has not reached the pinnacle. And he is a difference
Super Bowl,
maker.
you mean, right? Super Bowl, you mean. Okay.
Yes. He has not gotten himself to that level. And he is a dynamic athlete, perhaps the most dynamic athlete in the NFL or that we've seen in a very long time. And why is that? Why has he not won a championship or really been to the Super Bowl? Well, guess what? He hasn't had like superior offensive talent around him.
Right.
I mean, I don't even know who the hell the Ravens running back is. Like it's almost on par with like the Patriots. It's like just grab a guy, man. Like, come on. Like, and was it last year they were down? They didn't even have any more running backs because everybody was hurt, and it was like a linebacker or something. I mean, like
injuries have played a lot for the Ravens over the last few years. And so you can't really like it's hard for that, but I think
he hasn't had healthy talent around him consistently on offense.
But like if you put Lamar Jackson on San Francisco right now, they'd probably be undefeated, right? Because you take and I say this in the sense
like how one football though.
Well, no, I know, but what I'm saying is like Lamar Jackson can produce the way that he produces without guys, right? With can you name a Ravens receiver, right? So if one of the guys in San Francisco goes down, then he has something that can make up for it, is what I'm saying, right? But you also don't get that opportunity very often because if you have one dynamic player, it's hard to build with a whole bunch of other. I mean, shit. You could almost argue that for a long time, Tom Brady, they called him a system guy. That was the way that you talked about a game manager, right? Didn't turn the ball over, did all the right things, made the right throws at the right time. That's managing the game. It's not screwing up the game. And that's one of the things that young quarterbacks struggle with. Look at Zach Wilson. Can't manage a game to save his life at all.
Sure. Well, outside of Tua and Jalen Hurts, now we're not talking about the NFL here, but outside of Tua and Jalen Hurts, like Nick Saban has made his career out of game managers.
Oh, sure.
Look at Mac Jones, right? Why was Mac Jones? Did he appear to be so great? Because he was surrounded by
Devontae
extraordinary offensive talent.
Absolutely.
That's the difference. You have to. I think the talent around the quarterback is more important than the talent of the quarterback. Now you have to have a competent quarterback. I'm not saying you can plug any schmuck in there with the weapons that the Miami Dolphins have and get the same results. I'm not saying that at all.
Sure.
But I think that like most starting and possibly 50% of the backup quarterbacks in the NFL could produce the same results for the Dolphins that we're seeing right now.
It's possible. I think that when I look at the guys that he named, I think Brock Purdy probably for sure is a game manager in the sense that, like, if he was put on a team that didn't have as much talent, he wouldn't look as good as he does right now. And he's in the MVP discussion. Tua, though, I think has a lot more talent. He throws a very, very beautiful ball,
Oh, and I'm
extremely
not
accurate.
trying to
You know what I mean?
discredit him when I say that at all.
Oh, I understand what you mean. But I mean, like, Gardner Minshew could not do what the Dolphins are doing right now I don't think, in Miami. You think that
Watch your
Gardner
mouth.
Minshew could run? I'm just saying. You think that Gardner Minshew could run that offense the same exact way as Tua? I don't think so. I mean, look at what happened last year. They had to
Right.
put in, like, not Jacoby Brissett, whoever the hell the backup it was last year a couple of times, and they didn't look particularly good. So I think
That's fair. That's
you
fair.
know what I mean? So I think that I agree mostly with what Cam Newton had to say. Now, you also have to keep in mind that Cam Newton is looking at things through the prism of how awesome he thinks that he is. So there is that. But I don't think that he's wrong. I just think that, like, it's not a bad thing. People are like, oh my God, can you believe what he said about them? And I'm like, what? These guys are winning. They're not game changers. They don't have to be. They don't have to be, right? Come on.
Do you think that, so talking about the 49ers and Brock Purdy, do you think that if you plugged in a Lamar Jackson, per se, do you think that almost hinders Kyle Shanahan's offensive genius in a way? Do you think he needs somebody like Brock Purdy that's going to, like, execute his vision? And then if you had someone that's going to go off script so much, like Lamar or even Mahomes, that it would almost diminish his effectiveness as a play caller?
I don't know, because one of the things that the 49ers have is extreme talent. So, like, Deebo Samuel can do anything. Christian McCaffrey can do anything. Ayuk can do anything. I mean, George Kittle isn't even really like a possession guy the way that he used to be. He's a great run blocker, a great team. He's that glue guy. And it's like, if shit goes off script, Deebo Samuel can get open, Ayuk can get open, and Lamar can get them the ball. Or if shit breaks down, you have two Christian McCaffreys now, essentially, with
Right.
Lamar Jackson who can run and McCaffrey who can run. So I don't think it would necessarily hinder. I do think, though, that it would change a little bit because obviously they're calling plays to maximize the skill set of Brock Purdy. But the thing is like the skill set of Brock Purdy isn't as low as we thought it was because him getting drafted
Sure.
last, right? But I'm telling you, on Thanksgiving in that Eagles game, there are some throws that he is making that other quarterbacks in this league cannot and are not making right now. So do I think that Brock Purdy is game changer? Not yet. Could he be? Yes. Right? Tom Brady, those first 3 Super Bowls was not a game changer. He made the right throws when he had to. But Ray Lewis said it about, I think it was the second Super Bowl that Brady won, is one of the most influential plays that he had was like 3rd and 2, and all he did was dump it off to get 3 yards to get a first down. And it's like, that's the kind of stuff that your high ceiling guys don't necessarily do. Zach Wilson can't do it, but he can throw a football 70 yards.
Right. Do you think that Brock Purdy is making throws that other players in the NFL aren't making because they won't make those throws because they don't have the talent on the other end of the throw?
Maybe, but some of these balls are going into these windows that are like super tight. So whether you have the talent or not, you got to put the ball there. And
Right.
he's making technically sound throws, I think, that are better than what he is advertised as being able to do, is my point. And I think that that is valid. Dak Prescott has a high ceiling too, but we've also seen a really low ceiling. And look, all these guys have the same thing in common. When it looks bad, it looks real bad, right? Real bad. And Eli Manning,
Yeah.
couple of,
he would buy
right?
Now, granted, there were a lot more quarterbacks that played the game like that back when he was playing than there
Sure.
are now. Like, by definition, now he would be a game manager. That's what you would call him, a
Yes.
game manager. But when he was playing quarterback, a lot of the quarterbacks in the NFL looked a lot like him. You know, they played the game the same way. The dynamic running quarterback, the playmaking quarterback with their legs was, and you had it, but it wasn't, Cam Newton, for example, but it was not, it wasn't as prevalent.
No, absolutely not. But speaking of guys who are not game managers, Justin Herbert and the Chargers. Chargers have had a lot of talent around Justin Herbert, and they have not produced. They are kind of, in my opinion, coached, or, well, their coach was more like Lincoln Riley. doesn't care about a defense despite the fact that he's a defensive coach. So Brandon Staley finally mercilessly has been fired after an ass whooping last night. Would they give up 63? Something like that?
Yeah, they got absolutely hammered.
We've talked about the Chargers before. Brandon Staley, I thought, should have been fired last year after they blew that playoff game, but they gave him one more season to figure it out. It only got worse. He wasted a lot of talent, in my opinion. And Justin Herbert, to me, could be a game changer because he has that kind of talent, has already proven that he can do a lot of the things right. He's obviously put up big numbers, but the team as a whole has not produced at all. As a matter of fact, I think they've vastly underproduced. So Brandon Staley is gone, man. And I think that it's been a long time coming. Like, it took too long, in my opinion.
No, I agree. And like, is there another franchise out there that has done less with that much talent? You know what I mean? Like over the long period of time. Because think about even like the Marty Schottenheimer days. Like those
That's
are
true.
good, talented football teams, man. And they just could not put it together in the postseason. You know, Phillip Rivers, LaDainian Tomlinson, Antonio Gates. I mean, they had some dudes and they could not put it together come playoff time. And there was glimpses of that with now this year the wheels have fallen off entirely. But like this team under Brandon Staley had shown some promise and they had played good football, but they just couldn't put it together consistently. And you know, this year was his opportunity to like, okay, like we got to get it together, and that didn't happen. And it stinks because like you may have legit wasted like 3 of the best years of Justin Herbert's career or whatever. Because you know, you made a bad hire.
Yes. But I think that my opinion is that I think he lost the team when they lost that playoff game last year. Like, I'm not sure that some of the most important players in that team, I don't think that they wanted him there after that.
Didn't he make a really boneheaded like decision in that game? Is that what?
I don't know, but they blew a 28-point lead or whatever.
Gotcha. I thought because I know at one point in time, like we really criticized or at least
we
dove into a decision he made, and maybe it wasn't that game, maybe it was a different one.
He's Mr. Fourth Down. He likes to go for it on fourth down. He plays the analytics game a little bit too heavy-handed for my taste. Like, I think that there needs to be a happy medium somewhere because I'm both young and old at the same time. But Brandon Staley made a lot of bad decisions over the course of time. And honestly, when you have talent like Justin Herbert on any of these other teams that we talked about with all this talent, I mean, they had guys that were around him. And, of course, injuries play a factor. But it's not as if they were talentless on offense. Now, their defense has left a lot to be desired. Their pass defense this year is atrocious. And you saw that last night because the Raiders didn't score a point last week, losing 3-0 to the Vikings, and then put up 60-something points. By the way, a little aside, Antonio Pierce, who is the interim head coach of the Raiders, deserves a shot at that job because Raiders have looked significantly better. As much as I hate to admit it, they've looked significantly better than they has. But Brandon Staley is gone. And many people are speculating because rumor has it that Bill Belichick is done with the Patriots after this year. Nobody's commented officially on this. Robert Kraft has not said a word. Bill Belichick is never going to say a word. Many, many, many people see him with the Chargers. And I don't know how I feel about this.
You don't know how you feel about him leaving or him going to the Chargers possibly,
Well, I'm not going to believe that he's gone until they actually say something because
I think he's gone.
I think he is too, but I'm saying I'm not going to believe it because I feel like it's just like you want to hear it first, right? Like you can speculate all you want, but I think it's a mutual decision. I think that he's like, look, I can't do this here. Bob Kraft is like, I'm getting too old. I'm going to die before I see another playoff win. So we're going to draft a quarterback. We'll start over with a new guy, blah, 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 blah. But him going to LA, Bill Belichick is 70-something years old. Is he too old school for today's NFL? Maybe that is part of it because he did get by with, the best quarterback ever for 20 years. And do you really want, if you're the Chargers, do you really want to take a guy in his 70s who hasn't shown a lot of prowess in terms of GM moves and other things and put him with a team? And he's going to treat that team the way he treated the Patriots. And, is today's NFL player going to stand for that? Like, is Justin Herbert going to be like, cool, I'm so happy being just trashed in a meeting when I had a bad game.
I think that Bill Belichick's got enough of an ego that we're going to find out,
Yeah, we are.
for sure. And you wonder like what happens if a few years ago when Brady leaves, if they both just, or if he would have went off into the sunset at that point in time. Uh, what the perception of him would be. Now, obviously, Brady still would have won the Super Bowl in Tampa, so there'd be no doubt about his greatness. But Belichick's greatness probably wouldn't be in question the way that it is now, based on the results that he's had since Brady left. Um, yeah, man, I don't know if Nick Saban can do it at his age with even younger players. I think that Bill Belichick could do it, continue to do it too.
Sure.
And because the NFL is a business, at the end of the day, I don't think that players don't really care about if they like you. They just want to know that you know your shit and you're going to put them in a position to be successful. And I don't think there's any doubt that that's Bill Belichick's intention. Um, you know, maybe it's more of a question of is he willing to or capable of evolving with the game from an X's and O's standpoint? You know what I mean? Like schematically. Now the game is still a game of blocking and tackling, and a lot of the base principles of the game have not changed. People are just doing the same things in a different way. But it's still relevant. You still have to adjust and account for things in a different way than you did 10 years ago, or no one's hardly anyone's lining up in the I formation with two tight ends and you know doing that kind of thing anymore. There's a lot more that you have to prepare for because offensive coordinators have gotten more creative with how they attack defenses, and which is just the natural evolution of the game. So I don't know, man. Is he too old? Is the game passed him by? I'm not ready to say yes. I don't know. I don't know that I want to give any one of those receipts.
Nope, not yet.
So not yet, man. So we'll see. I'd like to see him get a fresh start somewhere else and see if he could put something together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna hate the guy or whatever. It is what it is. It's a business. He can do whatever he wants. It'll be interesting to see how the Patriots move forward without him, if that is indeed what happens. But we are bumping up to an hour and a half here, so I just want to talk briefly about the NFL playoff picture because this particular weekend in the NFL is just about every matchup has playoff implications because there's a lot of teams in the mix right now. So in the AFC, if the season were to end today, Ravens number 1 seed, followed by Dolphins, Chiefs, Jags, Browns, Steelers, and Colts. A lot of very mid football teams in there. But hey, it's always good when teams are in the mix, and that includes the Texans, Broncos, Bills, and Bengals. Somehow the Bengals with Jake Browning are still hanging around there, which is kind of amazing, actually. In the NFC, the 49ers, who I said were the best team, Cowboys, Lions, Bucks, Eagles, Vikings, Packers. You're going to have a team or two with a losing record in the NFC, which is interesting. So the NFC is very top heavy, and there's just going to be a lot of mid teams that get in there. Still in the mix, by the way, Chicago Bears, only a game out of, or one win away from possibly being in a wild card spot. They're like a stretch, but Bears,
so ridiculous.
yeah, Bears and Giants are a stretch at 5-8, but still technically close. Rams, Seahawks, Falcons, and Saints. The entire NFC the entire NFC South is terrible, but that entire division, except for the Panthers, is actually in it. Couple of games that I want to mention. I said almost all of these games. Vikings at Bengals. Somehow, both of these teams are 7-6, technically in the playoff hunt. Nick Mullins, the Josh Dobbs experiment is over versus Jake Browning. That ought to be a great game that nobody remembers, but has playoff implications. Steelers at Colts, man. No Kenny Pickett. Can Gardner Minshew get that big win? Colts are a 1.5 favorite at home. Tomlin could be in the hot seat if they lose, by the way. Broncos at Lions. This one's interesting because Lions fading. Broncos kind of rising a little bit, surprisingly, after giving up a 70 burger to the old Dolphins. But the Lions are 4.5 point favorites, which is interesting because maybe they're saying they're different at home. I don't know. What do you think?
I was just thinking to myself that obviously I'm a Colts fan, and so it'd be nice to see him make the playoffs. But I really think, like, especially on the NFC side, I think I might jump on the Lions. I mean, I've been on the Lions bandwagon, right? Let's not pretend that hasn't been the case. But I mean, I might really like take it to another level here down the stretch. That college football season, for the regular season of college football, is pretty well wrapped up. I don't give a shit about any of the bowl games. So I think I might really immerse myself in the Detroit Lions experience.
There you go.
And just when you think, though, man, a team is fading and you got a team surging, I'm not, I've always had people tell me, more than one person, that if you see a line come out, and you're like, no way, like that's so ridiculous. Um, just trust that it's accurate and take it. You know what I mean? Like the more ridiculous you think it is, the more right it probably is. And I mean, we'll see how that plays out. But I like the line. I told you, I'm in.
All
I'm
right.
on the bandwagon.
Bears at Browns. Joe Flacco, the starter for the rest of the season. That's amazing. He's like 58 years old, but he's been looking pretty good behind there. Bucks at Packers. I have mid teams with mid quarterback play, so you can watch that all day long. Texans at Titans. Texans maybe without CJ Stroud still because I think he's in the concussion protocol. He had a concussion last week, looked pretty bad against the Jets, but I think he's having an excellent rookie season.
Yeah, he is.
Excellent. And that's a team that doesn't have a lot of talent. So CJ Stroud maybe he's a difference maker, not just a game manager. We will see. Jets at Dolphins. I just said LOL because the Dolphins should win that game handily and continue on their rise. Chiefs at Patriots. Watch Bill Belichick win this game.
Yeah, wouldn't that be something?
Oh, God.
I don't expect that's going to
No.
happen. I mean, an 8-point favorite on the road, that tells you everything you need to know about the Patriots.
It certainly does. And they flexed it out of prime time. That tells you also a
Thank
lot
goodness.
by that. Yes. Giants at Saints. Tommy DeVito. Can he be the next big thing? His agent just got inducted in the Italian American Hall of Fame, and he's making some bank off of.
They have an Italian American Hall of Fame.
They absolutely do. Joe Montana, I believe, is in it as well. There are some great names in it, and Tommy DeVito's agent is now in it as well. So I think this has been fun, right? It's just a little bit fun. Giants fans are delusional, think this is the guy that's going to take him to the promised land, and next year he's going to be a great little backup. But they're having a lot of fun. Falcons at Panthers. If the Falcons can't win this football game, they don't deserve to be in the playoffs. But look what happens when you throw and give the ball to your best players. You actually start winning some football games. Amazing. Commanders stink, so the Rams should get to 500. Niners at Cardinals. This is kind of a sneaky game because the Cardinals with Kyler Murray have not been as bad as they were when they had Josh Dobbs as quarterback. So kind of watch out there for the Niners. It's a sneaky road game. They're 12-point favorites, so I'm like, Cardinals with the line kind of feeling in that game, but I don't know anything about any of that.
This is what I was just talking about. It seems so crazy that it's true.
Yeah, maybe it is. Cowboys at Bills. We're going back to the Super Bowls of the 90s. This, to me, is a litmus test for the Cowboys. They do not play as well on the road. The Bills just got a big win on the road, coming back home. They need this win more than the Cowboys do, but the Cowboys need to show me that they can win a game like this back-to-back. Because they just did it against the Eagles, so they got to keep doing it.
What a great game, man. Like,
Yes.
let's just hop in the time machine and go back to, like, 1994.
I want the red helmets from the Bills.
That'd be
I want
great,
the whole
man.
thing.
And then, like, it's in Buffalo in December. Like, hell yes, man.
Bring out Scott Norwood. Forgive him at the 50-yard line for his missed kick.
And then the Bills
time
lose
ago.
on a missed field goal wide
That's
right.
Correct. Ravens at Jags. Now, this one will be intriguing, but Trevor Lawrence, I think, is still hurt. He didn't look that great after that injury a couple of weeks ago. So the Jags are kind of in that weird spot where, like, they were exciting, but now with these injuries, they're looking like they could be fading a little bit. Ravens will probably keep that number 1 seed in tow. And the Eagles, I think, are going to get a get-right game on the road. Although at Seattle, I don't know if you know this, the Eagles have not beaten Seattle in 15 years.
Seriously, that's crazy.
It is.
15. Now, they probably haven't played a ton.
They played them like 6 or 7 times, so it's
Really?
actually not
Wow.
bad. Yeah. So interesting stat there, but I feel like
Seattle's had a good run, though. They've put together a couple
They
of
have.
strong decades here.
they definitely have. They're decidedly mid this year. They're 6
Yeah.
and 7, and the Eagles, I think, just need this game as a get right game. So
What if
just
the Eagles turn into this year what we thought they were last year? Because
know.
like we were selling the Eagles
I know.
last year all year long because we're like, oh, they're gonna,
Winning in
they're
the
gonna
NFL
fall off.
Winning in the NFL is hard. Okay, it's very, very difficult to do. And the fact that, I mean, if the Eagles finish with 12 or 13 wins with the schedule that they've had because they're playing a first place schedule, they're a damn good football team.
Yeah.
Regardless, right? That's not fading to me. That's being consistent, but it's a harder game. They have a target on their back. Traditionally, the loser of the Super Bowl doesn't do well the next season.
Right.
They're kind of debunking that trend. So good for them. Good for Nick Sirianni and all of that. So lots of NFL action this weekend. Please don't watch any bowl games. They start tomorrow. They go all the way through Christmas. start watching bowl games around December 31st when the playoff is
Exactly.
happening. But the NFL should give you plenty of action to watch this weekend. Although, excuse me, we are getting into that weird period where there's like Saturday football. And so red zone is being a little diluted, which is kind of pissing me off because I need as much action at the same time. I can't do all these singular games, but it is what it is. If you want to follow us on social media, TikTok at INC Sports, Twitter at Iceman and Coach, Facebook, INC Sports, Twitch, INC Sports, YouTube, obviously, Apple, Spotify, if you want to listen to us, Matty S Media Network, mattysmedia.com, right here. And that is all that we have for this week. So do you have anything that you'd like to anything that you would like to part wisdom-wise to our loyal listener base, my man?
Oh, just it's been a pleasure as always to come on here and do this, and thankful for those of you that popped in and hung out with us tonight. And no, it's been good, man. Love you guys. Thanks a lot, and looking forward to a good weekend of football. And as we close in on Christmas time.
Yes, absolutely. Christmas is right around the corner, but we will continue to be bringing you at least Football Friday, if not a little bit more. So I hope everybody is well and safe this week, and we'll talk to you next time. This is Football Friday.